this chapter we are going to discuss about IP routing. So IP routing is the major component of the CCNA, in which we will be talking about what exactly the IP routing is, how many type of routings and its routing protocols, and how you can configure and test it out, these all the protocols as well. So let's get started. The very first IP routing, say this. So the question comes, very first question is like, why routing is needed? That is the major concern. So some people says that routing needs to have the communications between two different network. Let us have a quick, introduction to the same, like how and when the routing is needed for that. Say for example, let's take an example. Let's say this is a router. Let's say this is your router, and a router has two interfaces. Router has two interfaces. Let's say this is two interfaces, and one interface is connected to different LAN segment. For example, this is your one LAN segment. This is another LAN segment. For example, I'll keep the IP addresses as well here. So let's say this is your router 1 as a name, and this is, let's say, fast Ethernet 0x0, fast Ethernet 0x1 port numbers, and the IP addresses has been assigned here as 10.0.0.100, here 11.0.0.100, and this is your LAN segment. You can consider as this is switch, this is switch, and then your number of PCs are there in this. Like this, you can consider this is your PCs. Now always remember, whenever you have the switch network after the routers, the PCs will have their own IP addresses and something known as default gateway. For example, IP addresses you will have to keep from this range only. So it is like 10.0.0.1, you can keep the IP address. Similarly, 10.0.0.2 you can keep here. Here you can keep 11.0.0.1 and 11.0.0.2 as a IP address you can keep here. Fine. After this, you will have to even create, you will have to define the default gateway as well. So for this, both of the PCs, the default gateway will be your 10.0.0.100. Basically, the router's interface IP address will become the default gateway of your PCs. Similarly, here the default gateway will be your 11.0.0.100. Fine. This is your default gateway because this is the interface IP address. What is the default gateway means? Actually, it is the entry or exit point of your network. It's like if you want to go out of your network, then you need the default gateway. So let's see how the communication process takes place in this. Consider this PCA is a source device and this PCD is a destination device. So I will just take an example of the data packet itself. Let's say there is some data you have where the source IP address is 10.0.0.1 and the destination IP address is 11.0.0.2. This is basically a packet, and let's say consider this is a data packet actually. So this request has to go directly to the router itself, but the point is right now source is this and destination is 11.0.0.2 is the destination. So normally your PCs will not forward any kind of request to the 11.0.0.2 directly, because they both are into the different network. See, 10 dot network and 11 dot network, both are into the different network. If they both are into the different network, definitely your request will be routed to the default gateway itself. Always remember, whenever source and destination is different, your request will be directly routed to the default gateway. I mean, your request will directly go to this. Fine. After this, your router is going to perform the routing lookup. By checking its routing table, it will perform the routing lookup. Now let's see the routing table of your routing table first. So if you see the routing table here for the router 1, you know how it will looks like. It will like 10.0.0.0, and then it will maintain the network ID and subnet mask. Let us consider subnet mask as /24 connected to fast Ethernet 0 by 0, and then it will maintain 11.0.0.0 /24. Let's say I am considering /24 and 0.1. This is basically a routing table of your router 1 itself. Always remember, this is a routing table of your router 1. This is also called as directly connected network of your routers. Now, the point to remember, in some of the iOS you will find this particular routing tables will be available by default, and in some of the routers you may need to enable. Always remember, if you have the old iOS in the sense something like before 12.x version, old iOS, you need to enable the routing table. You need to enable. But when it comes to the new iOS, in new iOS, by default it is enabled. By default it is enabled. Here you need to enable. Okay. So the moment you enable this in the old router, it will create the routing table. How exactly you can go ahead and enable the routing? It's all about, there is a command. You will have to go in configure terminal mode. And then you will have to define a command which is known as IP routing. You just need to enable the IP routing. The moment you enable the IP routings, routers will create its routing table. If you disable, let's say you are saying no IP routing, means it will disable the routing table. So let's say you have enabled the routing table in old iOS, or maybe you have the new iOS where the routing is already enabled. Now what happens? The packet from PCA, it has reached to the router 1. Now router 1 will check what is source here. Source is 10.0.0.1 coming from this link. Okay. What is destination? 11.0.0.2, and the network ID is 11.0.0.0. Is it matching with any of the interface into this routing tables? So 11.0.0.2, yes, it is there, and it is going with the fast Ethernet 0 by 1. Means your now request will be forwarded from here to here directly. So when the request reaches to your routers will check the source and the destination. After checking the destination address, routers will check its routing table. It will perform the routing lookup, and then it will come to know the network ID and exit interface is available in the routing table. If the path is available, it will simply forward the data exit out of that interface itself, and the communications will be possible. So it's like, whenever it comes to the routing, always remember, if you are having the directly connected network with your routers, you do not need any kind of routing protocols. Just enable the IP routings, you will be able to communicate with your services. Now, say for example, when we need routing protocols or when we need routing, so there is a process of that. Say you have a different, remember this is basically a scenario where you do not need any kind of routing protocol to be done. By default, just you enable the IP routing, you will be able to communicate with this. Fine. So when you need routing, see this. The scenario is very simple. Scenario is, let's say you have this particular router and you have the another router here, and now they are connected like this, and you have the LAN segment here and you have the LAN segment here as well. So let's say this is again your 10 dot network only, and this is your 11 dot network only. This is your router 1, this is your router 2. In this you have, let's say, 12.0.0.1 and 12.0.0.2. Now if you have some PC here which has the IP address like 10.0.0.1, and if you have the PC like 11.0.0.2, and now if you have the requirement to communicate from this source to this destination, in this case you need routing, because whenever source packet generating, it will be like this, destination will be like this, and if this packet goes to the router, your routers will have the 10 dot network and 12 dot network available in the routing table, because its directly connected network is this and directly connected network is this. But this is not available in the routing table, your packet will be dropped. So it is your responsibility to bring this 11 dot network into this routing table, then only you will be able to communicate. So this is where you need your routing actually. Now see, you need to understand the concept. So if you see here, for this router 1, this 11.0.0.0 is the indirectly connected network. So whenever you have the indirectly connected network, you need the routing. See this now, read this. So routers by default is aware of its directly connected networks. By default it is aware of your directly connected networks, and you no need any kind of routing if you are communicating with directly connected networks. If router wants to communicate with indirectly connected networks, then we need routings. So this is where your first scenario is matching. This is where your second scenario is matching. So I believe it is clear when you need the routings. Let's move ahead. When it comes to enabling your IP routing or disabling, as we discussed, how to do IP routing and no IP routing. What actually routing is? Routing is the process of moving your IP packet from one of the networks to another network. In simple term, it's like from 10 dot network I want to go to 11 dot network. Simple. Now remember, routing involves two basic activities. The first point is determining the best path if you have the multiple path available, and second thing, forwarding the packet through this best path. This is the two activity. For example, this is your router, another router like this. Consider the connectivity is there like this. Maybe this is a PC and this is a PC here. Now let's say if you want to communicate from this source to this destination, you have two paths. You can go via this, you can go via this also. That's what it is saying. Routing involves two things: determining the best path. This is the best path or this is the best path. Which one is the best path? Routing involves that. It will find out which is the best path. Let's say this is the best path. If it is best path, then let's forward the data via this path only. That's what your routing involves. How to enable? See, just IP routing is the command to enable the IP routing in old iOS. If you have the new iOS, this IP routing command is by default there. To disable IP routing, in the sense to disable routing table, you can define no IP routing. But make sure we do not give this no IP routing in the real time. Never. That day will be the last day of your job if you give this command. How to disable? We know that. How to verify routing table? Show IP route is the actual point, actual command through which you can verify how your routing table looks like. There are two different type of routings you have majorly. One is your static routing, another is dynamic routing. Static, you can consider a static as one of the process of manually configured routing protocol. Manually configured routing. It is not the protocol. Dynamic, where you can say there is some of the automatic process is going to be involved, and this automatic process will take place by using your protocols like RIP, OSPF, EIGRP. There is many routing protocols are there which is dynamic in nature. So we will discuss in our coming classes that what is static routing and what is dynamic routing in detail. So this is enough for this particular lecture. We will continue in the next lecture. Thank you. See you in next lectures.